and Russian war, the most threatening war after a long time, after World War II. But what is the reason behind this war? Why Ukraine is so important to Russia? I am Namratha, studying 8th class Aditya School, Narsapuram. Today I am here to tell the reason why Ukraine is so important to Russia and reason behind this war. Ukraine is invaded on 21st February 2022. The president of Russia, Putin, gave a live speech. There were some controversial statements in it. He told that Ukraine have never had a stable tradition of real statehood. That is a huge statement, but actually Putin rejected the statehood of Ukraine. And many times while giving his speeches, he hinted that he never agreed Ukraine as a legal state. But that is a false claim, but it is important to understand the past common history of Ukraine and Russia, role of West in it, and most importantly, why Ukraine is important to Russia. There are 5 main reasons for it. Shared history, geographical importance of Ukraine to Russia, role of NATO in it, change in leadership, and mindset of Putin. To know the first reason, which is shared history, we should go back in history, like really back in 9th century, when there were no countries existed like Ukraine and Russia. What existed is Kievan Rus, which is the present modern Ukraine, and this land increased and named after Soviet Union, which included Russia, Ukraine, and many other countries. That means Russia started in Ukraine. The root of Russia is Ukraine. Isn't it great to consider that Ukraine and Russia grew together, even they both have strong connection, historically, culturally, economically, and even politically. There is a lot of connection between them, so much so that out of 3 Ukrainians, 1 have their native language as Russian, and out of every 6 Ukrainians, 1 is ethnically a Russian. But in 1991, West Soviet Union had collapsed and the countries of Soviet Union became independent countries. But that doesn't mean the connection or the most cultural tie between Ukraine and Russia also break completely. Even in today's world, a lot of people consider that Ukraine and Russia are connected strongly. Among those people, President of Russia, Putin, is one of the members. The famous speech of Putin in 2005 tells his mindset. He told that the collapse of Soviet Union was the greatest catastrophe of 20th century. Listen to the next point carefully. Tens and millions of fellow countrymen were found beyond the fringes of Russian territory. According to Putin, the people of Soviet Union were all sane and they were thrown out of their motherland after the collapse of Soviet Union. Hence, the mindset of Putin and the shared history of Ukraine and Russia can lead to this conflict. The second reason is not known by a lot of people, but it is important, which is geographical importance of Ukraine to Russia. Ukraine is second largest country of Europe, which has 44 million people and high GDP of $155.6 billion. Not only that, but there are many resources found here like coal, iron, platinum, rare minerals, and even semiconductors too. There is a lot of fertile land in which crops like corn and wheat are grown in high quantities and exported to entire world. Not only that, but it is great producer and exporter of energy, oil and gas. These points are important, but the next point makes Ukraine geographical importance to Russia. To know about it, we should kind of dig into Russia a little bit. Russia has 37,000 kilometers of coastal line, but in that entire coastal line, there is not even a single warm water port which do not freeze in winter. That is a huge problem to Russia. And ports which are controlled by Russia are not directly connected to the ocean. So the ships which go through these ports should go through those points which are controlled by NATO. That is another problem to Russia. But the solution is Ukraine, which is situated right above Black Sea and which has 7 major ports, so that the trade would become easier. In fact, Russia exports natural gas and oil to Western European nations through the port of Ukraine. Hence, even geographically, Ukraine is important to Russia. The third reason is Role of NATO. What is NATO? NATO is North Atlantic Treaty Organization. What does it do? After World War II, Western countries made an organization NATO to stop the expansion of Soviet Union. But Soviet Union had collapsed and NATO increased. But Putin didn't like this at all, especially because NATO went to those countries which were earlier part of Soviet Union and made part of them. But this didn't happen with Ukraine. So Putin was furious. He didn't want the most important country of Soviet Union to be a part of NATO. But what does Ukrainians want? 64% of Ukrainians want to be part of NATO. More than 64%. It is not a small number. And this percentage was taken before the invasion. That means after the invasion, this number would definitely have increased. But Putin didn't like this at all. So this can lead to the conflict. And the next reason is change in leadership. President of Ukraine in 2014 is Viktor Yanukovych. And he had a reputation of being heavy-handed, corrupt, and even pro-Russian. He rejected the important trade deal of European nations and took $15 billion of trade bail from Russia. But the public of Ukraine didn't like this at all. There were protests and slogans everywhere as common. So his government needed to step down. Just like that, his government has toppled and he flew to Russia. And the presidents after him were pro-West. Even the current president, Volodymyr Zelensky, is also a pro-West and always criticizes the vocabulary of Russia and opposes the occupation of Russia. This is something again which Putin cannot handle at all. The last reason is the mindset of Putin. He is the only person who is behind the past actions of Russia and even the crisis of Ukraine in present time. He always thinks about the past common history of Ukraine and Russia and never agrees Ukraine as a legal country. But more than 70% of Ukrainians never agree with his idea and more than 72% of Ukrainians are hostile on Putin. But Putin never cares about it. What he cares is the past common history of Ukraine and Russia. He's completely disregarded on it, so much so that he never cares about the present time. These are the 5 most important reasons which led to conflict of Ukraine and Russia and why Ukraine is so important to Russia. By now, I hope you might have got a clear idea about the war of Ukraine and Russia and why Ukraine is so important to Russia. Thank you. This is Namratha signing out.